Yes, we're live. Okay,
Hello.
okay. I hope I fixed my audio issues. I turned your volume up on my end. If that didn't
Mm,
work, then we'll fix it better next time, I guess.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we can always do next time.
I might lie down in
Okay, so
bed while we record this because I am
uh,
I'm not turning on my heating like last year
oh shit,
because
yeah.
it's gas,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
Uh-huh.
and I don't like gas. So I'm not turning
Yeah.
on the heating, so I just keep thick clothes on. So, you know, put on
Yeah, that's
jumpers and run
fine.
around in jumpers at home. The thing is, though, I have this like really nice thickish winter socks, right?
Uh-huh.
And I lost them. I can't find them. So my toes
No.
feel somewhat fresh. They sort of have this tingling cold going through it. Um,
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
I get that a lot when I'm going barefoot. I don't
yeah.
know if you have the same thing in Germany or in Austria, but in France we have this thing where heating is done by steam. You
Oh,
know,
I heard
the
of that.
walls have like, yeah, we have like steam uh chambers on the walls, and
Yeah.
whenever you're cold you just turn them on and it creates steam. It can run on gas, but it can also
Okay.
run on
I know
electricity.
about this. I know about this because this is funny.
uh,
You will love this. You will absolutely love this. That
uh,
exists in Germany and also in Austria, but do you know where it exists?
where?
It only exists in the parts of Germany that were occupied
uh
by Napoleon.
Oh no. Oh
Yeah,
no.
I knew you would love this. Yeah,
Yeah, in the Confederation of the Rhine. Why
exactly.
don't other people get them?
I guess it hasn't spread forward yet. I know that.
uh,
So my parents, when my dad retired, right when he reached
uh,
retirement age and his retirement fund paid out, he decided that he was going to renovate the bathroom. I did some very
mm.
typical male things, like he bought the pissoir so he could piss while standing, without an, you know. And
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
also built this steam heating thing into the walls and into the floors.
Right.
And he now spends like hours sitting in there reading his books on the toilet, shit like that. Apparently.
Yeah, the simple ass lifestyle.
Oh
Just
yeah,
sitting there.
Mediterranean comforts. You people really are superior. You are the superior, you to Europe. You are the Europe that still knows how to enjoy life, I would say. Yeah.
I'd have to tell you, I don't know. I'm finding myself to be a fan of butter as of late.
Of what?
Uh, yeah, I moved with my roommate who's German.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we do these like little agreements where, in order to for me to like feed her cats when she's not home and shit like that, she makes like pies in exchange, and she
Oh.
cooks almost exclusively with butter. And
Ah,
yeah,
yeah. Butter
I
Europe.
gotta say it's a different experience for sure. The other thing that I see a lot from her is that she can't tolerate cooking oils. So
Mm-hmm.
one oil that I used to cook, it's not only the olive one but the sesame one, and the sesame one she can't stand the smell.
God, I love
So
this. I love
yeah, so I
sesame
put
oil.
yeah, I use it to cook, and she just kind of hates it. She's like,
One of my
yeah,
relatives
the scent.
married on the English side of my family. One of my relatives married an Indian woman.
Hmm.
I don't know which
Right.
state she is from in India. It's one of the very, very, very southern tropical places. And
Kerala.
not entirely sure. I'm embarrassed that I don't
Okay,
know.
okay, okay.
But she exclusively she fried with coconut butter and coconut oil. And
Mm.
it's quite amazing because if you cook with that stuff, with the coconut stuff, right? Um,
Yeah.
it sort of evaporates. Like, you know how when you
Oh.
fry a steak in a pan with some olive oil, right? You always get this
Mhm.
rancid remainder of oil left in the pan. Same when you fry it with
Oh
butter,
yeah.
really. But the
Yeah.
amazing thing about coconut butter, if you fry something with coconut butter, right, you get this lovely coconutish taste in the meat as well. Especially if you fry chicken, that's really great. But the best thing about it, it dissolves. There's nothing left afterward.
Oh.
There's
Oh, I
nothing
see.
left. It dissolves completely in the heat. The meat takes some of it in. So ever since that, right, my entire family now cooks sort of with this Indian coconut butter method.
They were converted,
Yeah, it's spread
to
like
coconut
wildfire.
butter.
So I know we sometimes joke about Europe being divided like olive oil Europe and butter Europe. Well, maybe we should enjoy this Indian invasion. Cook safely
Yeah.
with coconut butter.
Yeah.
Except for my
Yes.
grandma. My grandma had this trick when she would fry meat, right? She
Hmm.
would, instead of putting the oil in the pan, she would take the meat and store it in oil for a day before. And the meat would suck up all the oil that is needed for it to fry. And then you can fry the meat in the
Oh,
pan, and the oil is already in the meat, and you don't have to put oil in the pan, and there is no remaining oil in the pan after you're done frying it.
yeah, I can see that.
Yep.
Huh. It's sad that I think a lot of that knowledge will be lost a couple of years from now,
Well,
because
it's yeah,
that kind of thing is the thing that someone who's like a full-time homeowner can do, right? Like planning days in advance what you're going to
yeah.
do with like a cooking oil,
Well, one day in
and
advance. You just
yeah,
put it like a one night in advance. You just put the meat into the oil over the night. And we now live in a world where
yeah,
everything has to be so now that we don't even plan
yeah,
that
yeah,
much in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
advance.
Yeah, like looking forward to the things that you're cooking is something that's so strange these days.
Yeah.
In order to fry better potatoes, right? To fry a better potato, one thing you can do is to like freeze it overnight and then you fry it. That way, the oil makes it crunchy on the outside but soft on the inside. And there are a lot of industrial kind of, franchises that do that with their potatoes like pre-made, but oftentimes they don't take out the starch. And to take out the starch, you also need to leave them like in water for a while. And that's how I cook my potatoes these days. But yeah, it takes a while. It takes like 18 hours just to like get the potatoes ready for you to cook. And
One
yeah,
thing out of my
as time
dating
moves
life,
forward, uh-huh.
one thing out of my dating life, something that I really enjoy when I'm getting into like a closer relationship with someone is
Mm.
making sushi with my partner, with whoever it is I'm
Oh,
dating. And the thing
yeah.
about that is you have to do some planning forward because you have to cook the rice a day or 2 days in advance and they ferment in
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
vinegar
yeah.
and all that, you know. So, yeah, you have to do that in advance. And then you have to plan in, okay, movie night, we're going to sit together and we're going to spend 2 days. First we're going to go to the grocery store and buy all the ingredients we want to experiment with in the sushi. Then we come back home,
Mhm.
we make the sushis, and then we sit down and spend an entire day watching movies. So, yeah, that's a long plan thing. That's like one of the few long plan
Oh,
things we
shit.
do.
Yeah, wait, so you experiment cooking with your dates?
It's a kind of a trick that I do. It's a very nasty thing to be honest.
Yeah,
So this is some
I
dating
would.
advice for me, right? From me for you or anyone else who might be listening, right? I have an uncle. He's a chef. Worked as a chef. I don't think he works there anymore. He used to work as a chef at a ski resort in Switzerland. Really great. Like I don't know what they call it, 5-star cook or something. And he's just.
Michelin? Or
I think he
Michelin?
worked at a Michelin restaurant. I think he
Mm.
learned at a Michelin restaurant, but he isn't one himself. But
Mm.
he's not one of the great cooks, the amazing famous cook. But he is a good cook. You know what I mean? He learned that
Yeah,
shit
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
he worked that job. How long did he work that job? 40 years. So I guess you
Mm.
can imagine if you work. I think at the ski resort he worked 15 years. So if you work 40 years of your life being a restaurant chef, that does probably teach you a lot. So he taught my
Yeah.
brother a lot of cooking. He taught my mum a lot of cooking. He taught me some cooking. And the thing I learned through him is, and that's sort of the trick that I do in my dating life, is
Mm.
when I want to hook someone, I slip in conversation. I slip in a question. I ask them what their favorite food is, right? And then I
Mm.
spend a week learning how to cook that. And then I invite them in. Like if I want to date someone, before I even ask them out for a date, I ask what their favorite food is, and then I spend a week learning how to cook it, and then I invite them in for a date and cook it for them. That's my nasty little
Ah,
dating trick, you could say. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think that's nice. Yeah, yeah.
and sushi
Oh,
works
I'm a lot.
every time, almost every
Yeah.
single time. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you experimented like live there.
With sushi,
You
or
know
sushi is when
the
you're in a
morning after.
relationship or in a friendship
Uh-huh.
with someone. It's generally experimenting with sushi is great. Like just cook up the rice, right?
Mm.
And then just
Mm-hmm.
go and I don't know. There's so many things you can put into it. Paprikas. Um, my ex tried putting pineapples into sushi, which was a bit weird.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, in my case, I learned, when I was trying to move away from like bread as like a source of carbohydrates, I was
Hmm.
trying to move into rice because rice, a per portion per like a cup, it has like 2 grams of protein. So you're getting protein, at least a little, right, with your starchy food.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, I picked up a book on like Chinese cuisine
Ooh.
and I learned to like cook a lot of Chinese stuff actually. Here's the thing, when you go to a Chinese place, the ones that sell like fast food and they serve it
You're
to you
not
on the
eating
spot.
Chinese food. I know that. I know that.
Sometimes you are, but the food that you get is like the food that people typically make at like parties, for example.
Yeah.
It's the party food. It's like what in Mexico would be like asado de boda, so what in France would be like a nata à l'orange. It's the thing you take out to like impress the guests, and that's not like the day-to-day food that most people have, in their daily life.
I'm glad you
Uh,
didn't ask
Chinese,
me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Chinese cuisine, the cuisine that is actually what people eat in their daily life. It's very healthy. It has like a lot of greens. Rice is like a staple, but there are other things that go into it. I guess the Chinese are very proud of their cuisine, and they have like this whole idea of we've been doing this for like 6,000 years, right? We know what we're doing. And
I'm.
yeah, I guess whenever I have dates, I make like some indie Chinese dish. Uh, last one, the last time I made that, one really hated it and the other really loved it. Because yeah, I guess that's the thing, since it's food that has a lot of identity, it's very easy to either like it a lot or dislike it a lot. And it's always a surprise with that.
I'm
I
glad you
assume you
didn't
have
ask me
tasted.
what German party foods are.
What are German party foods actually?
I don't want to. It's the most grotesque abomination ever created in human history. I don't know its exact. I
Okay,
think it's called the Fleischmobs, or what
Fleischmobs.
Fleischmobs? Or wait. Let me Google it quickly. Um, it's the most disgusting thing. Wait. Ah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't remember the exact word, but it's basically. Oh no. Oh God! I just saw it. Ah.
Okay.
It's so
Oh,
disgusting. It's
I
so
am worried now.
disgusting. Oh, I'm so glad that the people listening to this can't see it. Oh, oh.
I
Fleisch,
can't see it either.
Mettigel. Okay, they can look it up if they want. Mettigel. The Met Eagle. And I'm gonna post an image in the Discord where we're recording this. This is.
Okay. Metigo. Ugh.
Yeah, this is what it looks like. You just laughed so loud your microphone broke.
Oh shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
It's ground up
it,
beef with raw onions and olives shaped to look like a hedgehog. It literally translates to the ground meat hedgehog. And that's what people eat at German parties. They just grub their fucking fingers into a pile of ground up beef and raw onions and they whirl it down. It's like, oh my god,
oh my god.
we're such disgusting barbaric savages. It's just utterly contemptible and disgusting. Ugh,
Uh,
it's
I've
so
never seen this
gross.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is like the deep lore. the deep lore ones. My German friends typically bring something called Kartoffelminwurz, I think.
I think this
Potatoes
only
baked.
old people eat this at their or midlife crisis people.
Oh,
I've never seen this as like a young people celebration. I don't think anyone would actually bother chewing onto
okay.
this. We should
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
talk
And you
about the topic that we actually wanted to talk about,
yeah,
which is like,
Kissinger.
yeah, Kissinger is dead. Bring your Met
Kissinger
Eagle
died.
for the
Yeah.
party.
I'm letting go for the part. Yeah, fuck.
uh,
What do you think about Kissinger? Because
well,
I
you
guess
know
you
that I
already
don't like him.
mentioned.
You
Oh
know I
yeah, you
don't
don't
like
like
him.
him.
He's a realist.
But is
Fuck him.
it? No, but like here's the thing that's so interesting to me about him, right? Um, One criticism that realists, for people who might not know I'm a classical realist, uh, one thing about realists that is typically like a critique of the liberal theory of international relations is that the liberal theory will often make the case that in order to get to a world with international law where all the countries have like peaceful problem solving mechanisms, right? uh, the liberal world has to be established first. And there are a lot of, let's say, uh, liberals in international relations that are more like realists in the service of liberalism. And I always understood Kissinger to be like that kind of person,
Yes.
because he supports the United States, like generally like the Western aligned interests, that kind of thing. And that's been his thing, like that's what makes him so interesting to me.
It's a bit
Like
personal
he's
for me. It's a
mhm,
bit more personal for me because I actually know people personally, Chileans,
mhm.
who are the descendants of refugees from the Pinochet regime. And that
Oh,
is sort
okay.
of. I
Mhm,
actually know one person who is impacted in two ways by by Kissinger.
mhm,
His dad is an Argentine refugee from the Galtieri dictatorship, and his mum
mhm,
is a Chilean refugee who fled from Pinochet. Actually, was on a Pinochet death list and managed to escape
mhm.
just in time. Um,
Oh shit.
so through this, I got into a lot of reading material about what it is that Pinochet did, what it is, and
Mhm,
it's weird. A lot of people know more about Pinochet's crimes than they do about Galtieri's crimes or the crimes of the Argentine junta in general. You should not forget the Argentine junta. What a lot of people don't know is that the Argentine junta
mhm,
actually killed more people than the Pinochet regime did in Chile. It was a
mhm,
horrific regime, a horrific dictatorship, and the justifications given for it. Like this is also my problem. This is a problem that goes wider than just that. It's also the problem that I have with someone who a lot of libertarians love, Friedrich von Hayek and Ludwig Mises and all these
mhm,
people. You know who
mhm.
said that
Yeah.
okay, yeah, if we're going to have, they were big supporters of the Pinochet regime. And the
Uh-huh.
reasoning behind it was okay, we want to have a libertine society, we want to spread liberalism, blah, 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 blah. But, when threatened with communism, it is worthwhile empowering a Pinochet. It's worthwhile,
Mhm,
so basically abandoning all values of liberal democracy just for the sake of getting rid of a. Because there was no communism. I mean, this is the one thing that
yeah,
annoys me
yeah,
for
yeah.
people who keep making excuses for the Pinochet regime. The Allende government was a socialist government. It was not a communist
Yeah.
government. It was
They
sympathetic
were
to
like,
people like
uh,
Castro. But in modern terms, it was basically what? A Lula government? Comparable, maybe?
yeah, it was different because Salvador Allende was like an ideological Marxist. He called himself a Marxist. He participated in like Marxist internationals groups. He supported the Chinese claim to Taiwan. Um, a lot of things like that. But he was elected, right?
Yeah.
Like he won a legitimate election and he got into power through democratic means. Uh,
And he
the
would also have left office if he
Yeah,
would
he
have
would have
been
left.
unelected.
Yeah, because he believed. Allende ideologically is very strange in this sense because he believed Chile had a destiny as a democratic nation, right? He thought that Chile was going to be like in the future an example of liberal democracy. And even if he was like personally very, very left wing, he would not see a left wing where Chile could not like elect out the leftists, if that makes sense. So that's why he was so different, to like the revolutionary Latin American socialists. And then I guess that the sad thing that happened, is that democratic socialism was very discredited among leftists after Allende,
Yes.
because yeah, we just kind of said to each other, this doesn't work, right? If you don't go through the means of uprising, if you don't acquire a state through revolution, right? If you go through the democratic means, then the liberal democratic world will like punish you and make you unable to function. And yeah,
And
that's kind of
you,
how that
you
went.
know what the horrifying thing about this conversation is that we're having here
Uh huh.
is
Yeah, yeah,
we could go on for hours talking about
yeah,
Pinochet, talking about Argentina, which
yeah,
ultimately are like a mistake that some people make is that they take away the responsibility of Pinochet and the Argentine junta, their responsibility in the crimes they committed. But yes, they were allies of Kissinger. And Kissinger threw his support behind them. Kissinger is the reason why they maintained power after the coup. And Kissinger is the one who
mm-hmm.
helped whitewash all the horrible things they were doing. And the really horrific thing about this conversation is we can spend hours talking about Chile and Argentina, and we wouldn't even touch on Indonesia. We wouldn't even touch on
Bangladesh, for example.
Bangladesh, yeah. We wouldn't even
Yeah,
touch
yeah,
on Vietnam, the grotesque Christmas bombing campaign, the fucking incursions in Laos, all the horrific
yeah,
things that are on Kissinger's record.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's, yeah,
That's true.
the screwing
It's
over of Syria, which led to, in the long term,
the
to the
Assad regime. Yeah.
not just the Assad regime, but the Lebanese civil war, contributed substantially to
Mm.
the Lebanese civil war. Um, I find it also very grotesque that people give Kissinger credit for the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, an
Oh, yeah,
agreement
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what Kissinger had no involvement in that agreement, zero.
Mm-hmm.
He deserves zero credit for that agreement, and
Mm-hmm.
just yeah, all of this just obscene to me. It's obscene, and he's praised as like one of the world's greatest diplomats. And the way I was introduced to him in terms of like his theories and the beliefs that he had, not really theories, there are no Kissinger theories, was reading his doctoral thesis, his Harvard thesis.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see. What
when
what
I
what
was a
was that
student.
about?
It's the bleakest shit I've read in ages. It's literally just edgy
Okay.
boy realism. It's there are no values,
Mm-hmm.
there are no ideals, there is no good, there is no bad, there's only power, and therefore we can do whatever we want. But that is really how he
That's
saw the world. I think if you want to get an idea of how Kissinger
yeah.
viewed the world, you need to read his
Mm-hmm.
doctoral thesis.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so he was like a very classical, like offensive realist then.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
And that is the thing that he
that's
would
so strange.
portray. That is the thing that he would say every time. You know, the awful things he said, the awful things he did,
Mm.
right? He justified them by saying, it's worth it because only power matters. Concerns about ethics, concerns about morality, concerns about ideals, they don't
Yeah.
matter. It only matters to maintain US power over its sphere of influence and the hegemony that creates.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the results. We saw the results. And one thing that I think people like Chile, Pinochet, the junta in Argentina, that is Kissingerism, if you can call it that, put into effect, right?
Mm.
But we also have examples of what Kissingerism looks like when it fails, which is Bangladesh.
Mm.
Kissinger sent, or convinced Nixon, we should say, to send an aircraft carrier into the Indian Ocean, right, to prevent Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, from invading
Yeah,
Bangladesh,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Mm.
They wanted to prevent Indira Gandhi from invading Bangladesh and stopping, actually, the Bangladeshi genocide. And Kissinger
Mm-hmm.
failed because the Soviets sent their nuclear submarines into the Indian Ocean and threatened the American aircraft carrier groups and basically bullied the American aircraft carrier groups out of the Indian Ocean so that Indira Gandhi could successfully invade Bangladesh and do the war against Pakistan. And that's
Yeah.
an example of what Kissingerism in failure looks like, right? When Kissinger foreign policies fail. And I wish more people would talk about Bangladesh in this context specifically, because it shows what happens when you don't do Kissingerisms. What is Bangladesh today? It is a functioning democracy, and we should not forget that the Indians prevented a horrific genocide. 3 million people were murdered in the
Mm.
Bangladesh genocide by the Pakistani armed forces. 3 million people. It was also the largest mass rape in human history, which the Pakistani army did in Bangladesh. And the Indians put an end to this. And the Indians helped the Bangladeshis. I know relations between India and Bangladesh are now fraught, but they helped the Bangladeshis create a functioning state.
Yeah, yeah.
And the long-term
Here's
effect.
something.
Look at what happened in Indonesia. Look at all the dictators that Kissinger propped up. Like the one thing that really bothers me about Kissinger is everything he advocated, everything he stood for, fell apart to nothing and was revealed to be a sham and utterly worthless nonsense the moment the Berlin Wall collapsed.
Yeah,
And
yeah. He was
with the collapse of the
kind of.
Berlin Wall, like we
Uh-huh.
shouldn't just forget that the collapse of the Berlin Wall also meant the collapse of the communist sphere, the communist states. No, the collapse of the Berlin Wall also caused, and thanks to the Bush president, the first Bush, he decided to let go of all the Cold War dictators that the US propped
Mm-hmm.
up. And they all,
Mm-hmm.
one by one, failed. Pinochet, the Argentine junta fell before, but Pinochet fell as a result of that. The Indonesian dictatorship collapsed. The Filipino dictatorship collapsed. All these regimes that Kissinger was so adamant had to be propped up, they all fell apart to nothing. And Kissinger, what he left behind, and I'm rambling here, and I should then sit back and give you time to talk. Kissinger's legacy is a bunch of smoldering ruins on a mass grave.
Yeah, yeah. He broke up a lot of things in the name of like ideas. That's something that I've always wondered about him. Do you think that in his mind he was something akin to an anti-fascist, for example? Because here's the thing, right? Uh, Kissinger, we have to remember, survived Nazi Germany, right?
Yes.
He was the first Jewish Secretary of State, I think,
Yes.
and then he became a very important Secretary of Defense in the United States, and he had a position of responsibility in terms of very important geopolitical decisions. And I get the sense that you know he resound with some themes that are generally a part of Israeli foreign policy, which is that we're never going to allow ourselves to be in a position of vulnerability ever again, that kind of thing. So when I see Kissinger, I kind of see that like aggressive anti-enemy of anti-enemy of Jewish people, I guess. Do you know what the Nakam was?
I
Do
think
you know
of
what
it
the
more
Nakam?
as I don't know what that was. I think of it more like what my opinion is. You watched the video I made, which is he's
Yeah,
sort of a
yeah.
product of the crisis of modernity, a rejection of
Mm.
idealism, just in favor of sort of like power dynamics. Did you ever notice that Kissinger barely ever had anything to say about American domestic politics?
Yeah, because he was a foreign policy person. Yeah, that's the
Yeah, and because he deemed
yeah.
it as irrelevant. And that is the most horrific thing about him. When you bring up to him
Hmm.
what happened in Chile, he would say it's
Yeah,
irrelevant because it's just a domestic issue.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Ultimately, though, I do see this thing about, you know, the aggressive defense of liberalism. You know,
Hmm.
liberalism, in order to get to the world of international rights, in order to create the international world order, so to speak,
You can't
we need to
apply
recognize,
liberal,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we need to
the
recognize
Morgenthau
that
school of thought.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we need to recognize that we do not live in the world of the international world order, and we have to create it. And I think that Kissinger might have been, at least ideologically, right, like the kind of person who argued for the creation of that world from like his militaristic perspective. Um, and that concerns me because that's the criticism that realists, I mentioned that we have, that there are some liberals that are just realists in the name of liberalism.
Hmm.
And
Not
in
realists.
that
Yeah.
sense, yeah, exactly. And in that sense, they renounce, a lot of the liberal, no, a lot of the realist critique and the realist limitations that we put on our own theory. Because if it's done for the sake of, this greater ideal, then all of a sudden everything is permissible.
I
That's
am very much the opposite
that's
of
what's
him. You know,
concerning.
I'm very much an
Um,
idealist
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
terms of
yeah.
like my beliefs in terms of internationalism and international relations.
Mm-hmm.
I believe very strongly in the implementation and enforcement of strict standards,
Yeah.
very strict standards. That it's difficult in international politics to come to common agreements with states that, in terms of their values, are like fundamentally objectionable to you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult, for example, for the US and China to come to a agreement on a sort of common set of international standards. It would also be
Mm-hmm.
difficult for, I guess, um, in our day and age, for us to come to a sort of agreement on common standards with Russia. That may in part be
Yeah.
impossible because the entire outlet of Russian foreign policy is there are no standards, right? The modern day realists are the Russians, ironically enough.
Well, a
Um,
type of realist, yeah.
yeah, a type of realist. And thank you for correcting me there. A type of, not just we shouldn't throw
Yeah,
everything in together as one. Yeah.
yeah. There
Um.
are.
Sorry.
I'll let you finish your point. Yeah. Yeah, no. Like the one of the schools of realism that I find the most interesting is the Copenhagen school right now. And they've developed this theory called regional security compacts. Well, it's part of a larger theory, but the concept of a regional security compact is the idea that sometimes you may have areas of the world because of their geography or because of travel between them, questions of security are like permanently tied together.
Hmm.
But the way that you resolve those questions of security is open ended, you know and they are the realists that right now are trying to make sense of the European Union as like a positive thing. They're saying that Europe, the Great European Prairie, for example, is a regional security compact,
Hmm.
and the way that Europeans have resolved the peace in the compact is by agreeing not to threaten each other, to tie their security interests together. And the argument they make with vis-a-vis Russia is that Russia is part of the Great European Prairie, but it's not participated, at least yet, in this process of agreeing not to kill each other with this like corridor that we have uh, across Western and Eastern Europe that makes it very easy
To
to
kill
march
each
on
other.
these and makes it
Yeah.
very easy to like get to one place to another and that sort of thing.
I dislike viewing Europe from the realist perspective. I don't like European realism, but I can tolerate them. The
Mm-hmm.
most revealing thing for me in this regard was a conversation that I had with so ever since I made that China video that blew up so weirdly, um,
Right.
I've been in conversation in email contact with a Chinese university professor, back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And he's the one, I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned him in the previous video that I made. He's the one who said, "Hey, we welcome Europe because you're finally becoming a civilization state, and it will be good from
Yeah,
realism's
yeah, yeah.
perspective, from our Chinese realist perspective, to have this European civilization state that is finally just as great as China." So,
Yeah.
junior
You're finally
partner.
catching up to us. Yeah,
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 we're having
yeah.
a
Okay.
bipolar world. So that's the way I see it. I don't like the idea of
Mm-hmm.
viewing Europe, the European Union specifically, in realist terms,
Mm-hmm.
because it invites in the idea of spheres of influence. Um,
Yeah, that is very uncomfortable for
yeah,
liberals. Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah, yeah.
when I read a lot of the realist papers, the European realist stuff, and the things that they talk about, they
Hmm.
always have to talk about North Africa. They have to talk about,
They do.
yeah, the security
Yeah.
of the Suez Canal. They talk about Morocco. They talk about migration. They talk about access to African markets. And it always boils down to the same thing. It always boils down to, even though they don't openly admit it, that Europe has a sphere of influence. If we go, if we take Europe as a realist thing, then Europe has a sphere of influence over North Africa. And I am kinda terrified of that because I do not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
want a Europe run under realist foreign policies that instigates the kind of horrific things that Kissinger did, but in African countries,
Yeah, I
specifically in
get
North
that.
African countries. I don't want that. I find that idea horrifying.
Yeah. The thing I would say to that is that we already do, at least from the perspective of a French person. We are in West
Definitely.
Africa.
Well, that's
Yeah,
you. That's not we.
yeah,
That's you. That's you frogs. I,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's my biggest. Like, so many French people are always like annoyed, but why don't you like the French so much? Because I'm scared of you dominating Europe. I don't want German soldiers fighting French colonial wars in Cote d'Ivoire. That's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
I hope that within realists, the Copenhagen school gets more, uh, gets more relevant because they at least are trying to resolve the issue that uh, there are more ways to resolve conflict other than domination. You can create like blocks that resolve their security interests in such a way that they don't have to subordinate each other or kill each other. One way to peace is to like agree about the realism, but resolve it in liberal ways. I guess you create you solve the security questions so that the liberal world can emerge out of a world where nobody feels threatened.
I think the most
Mm-hmm.
prominent school of realism that we are seeing now emerge in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
like in America, it's sort of a dead horse.
Yeah, it's
Since yeah,
the offensive
yeah,
realists and the defensive
yeah.
realists, and they're like crazy people.
It's not just because Kissinger is dead. It's because like who takes um, who takes Mersheimer serious? Like most people who well,
Yeah,
I mean that in the sense of like most people who agree with Mersheimer and post his clips don't even know what Mersheimer is or what he
yeah, yeah,
represents,
yeah.
which is funny. And
Also,
Obama's experimentation with realism was just a catastrophe. So it's a dead horse
mhm,
in America. I don't see realism coming back in America. America has to redefine itself. I don't know, as either the arsenal of democracy or as Peter Zion thinks, become isolationist again. In Europe, the school of realism that I see becoming more and more prominent is this Polish realism, this intermarium idea
mhm,
that there needs to be a collective Eastern European sphere of influence, of cooperation
yeah,
from the Baltic states down to the Black Sea, that all these countries that were traditionally always, well, not traditionally, but historically would be the correct term, that were historically always invaded by the Germans or the Russians, they all need to work together now to form a common defensive bloc. I see that becoming more and more prominent, and I
uh-huh,
don't worry about it as much in terms because it's fundamentally defensive. It's a group of
mhm,
countries scared by history. It's scared of Russia. Europe is what you could call it, right? Who
yeah,
want to
yeah,
work together, and within a European context, within internal development, close cooperation between Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Ukraine, Czechia, Slovakia, Hungary is something that I would welcome. It's something that would
mhm,
further integration of Europe in general. It's something that is a positive. I know that a lot of people are kind of suspicious of it, but internally, in terms of internal development, I would
mhm,
love to see. Keep in mind that Lithuanians and Poles fought border war skirmishes 70 years ago, 80 years ago. And if these two
yeah,
countries can overcome their differences and work together, that would be an amazing achievement by the Poles and the Lithuanians. I would
mhm,
welcome that.
yeah. In the theory, that's what we call middle power management, which is basically what you do when you are a country that is not like big enough to compete with the great powers, but you still want to exist and navigate the world in such a way that is effective and productive to you, right?
Mm.
This is the thing with Mearsheimer that a lot of people, just kind of don't understand. He's making realism for Americans, and he's
Yes.
arguing, that the Americans should dominate the world and that they should protect these certain security spheres, because he's arguing as a realist protecting American interests. But for example, you can be a realist and a Ukrainian and
Yeah.
say that, we can align ourselves with the European Union because this is a security compact that is a better security compact than the one we would be in were we in Russia, right?
Yes.
And in that sense, why not listen to the Ukrainian realist, right? Who is also concerned about the state and the continued existence of his independence and that kind of thing. Realism just gives you tools to navigate the world. It's up to like individuals to decide the values
Yeah.
they want to pursue,
And it's always
and
different from
yeah,
country to country.
uh,
Like I'm going to
yeah,
have a segment on realism in the big, never-ending Dutch history series that eventually I have to get to. Um,
yeah,
so the Dutch foreign policy during its golden age, when it was an empire, was
mm,
fundamentally a realist foreign policy. I don't know what the name of the Dutch stadtholder who ruled the Netherlands at the time was, but
mm,
he basically outlined it as we are surrounded by the French, the English, and the Holy Roman Empire. So the thing, wait, what was it? The French, the English, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Spanish are our enemies. So what we must do if we want to survive and become a prosperous empire ourselves, and that was sort of the outline, not just security, but become an empire, is we must play the English, French, Spanish, and Holy Roman Empire out against each other. And that's what they did very successfully. They
mm,
instigated wars between England and France, between France and Spain, between England and Spain, between France and the Holy Roman Empire, between Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. And the moment that this realist foreign policy failed was when the French, the English, and the Holy Roman Empire made an alliance against the Dutch and decided to end the Dutch Golden Age basically with that. But that's
mm,
going to be a segment that
yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
talking about. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
realism can be very different from many perspectives. Like this is also yeah, Dutch
Yeah,
realism.
it's
Play everyone out against each other so you can prosper.
yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't give you values, right? Like the
Yeah.
values are for the person to decide. It just gives you the tools of analysis. It's kind of like anarchism in the sense that it's not an ideology as much as it is a methodology.
Yes.
And liberalism in international relations has an ideology and a methodology because you
Yes.
don't only care about creating the world of uh, the international world order. You also care about the steps, right? Like you want to make sure that you don't become a monster
Yes.
uh, in the creation of the liberal world. And yeah, that's always been a struggle.
That's my
I think
big
that
like that is the
uh,
main thing that I have with realists when I argue with them
uh,
is that they do not appreciate or understand moral outrage or outrage that I come
yeah,
to through sort of principled stances. I find it grotesque that Obama, in his misguided realism, allowed Assad to butcher 500,000 Syrians. That's
yeah,
grotesque
yeah.
to me. And a realist, however, when I point that out to him, doesn't care.
Yeah, it's the poker
Doesn't care.
chips. Like you have to break a few eggs,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
then again, there are also failures in sort of the idealistic policies. So, for example,
Mm,
the bombing of Libya, which is often
mm,
blamed on the Americans. It's weird. You probably noticed that yourself. The killing of Gaddafi and the bombing of Libya in 2011. Everyone always. No, wait, that happened in 2012. Everyone always
mm,
blames it on the Americans, right? But it was the French who did it. The French wanted it to happen. The French wanted to kill Gaddafi and rid North Africa of him. And they did the justification for doing it was entirely built on this sort of liberal internationalist idealism, which was he is a tyrant, and we must rid the world of this tyrant. So we
yeah,
kill
yeah,
him,
yeah.
but
Same as Iraq,
no plan for what to come
which ended.
afterwards. No plan
Yeah,
for what to come
yeah,
afterwards, and now Libya is in a stalemate civil war.
yeah. Liberalism kind of believes that uh, the human principles, right? Like the human principles that we build our society on are kind of inherent in any human being, and they can come to them through like rational methods. So, tyranny in the liberal perspective is an unnatural state for human beings. And if
Mhm.
you rid yourself of tyranny, then humans default to their natural forms of organization, which is liberalism. But what we've seen so far is that that takes, a little bit more of work. It's not as simple, right? And yeah, I think a challenge, like a 21st century challenge for liberals, is to, figure out how to create liberal internationalism in a way that's not as destructive as the 20th century, late 20th century experiments ended up, right?
Mhm.
Kissinger, in a sense, is like someone we need to defeat intellectually because he provided an alternative by the end of the day. And you know
He
what's going to be
terrifies
the
me.
response to Kissinger? Yeah, 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 yeah,
He terrifies me because I am scared that, especially now,
yeah.
where we might be entering a new Cold War, right?
Yeah,
I'm terrified that Kissingerism will be coming back. This sort of
yeah,
ruthless
yeah.
power
I hope
dynamic
not.
politics of just we can do
Uh,
whatever we want, you know. Like
yeah,
we're
used to
seeing
be.
two authoritarian, we're seeing two blocks emerge in the world, right? We're seeing a liberal democratic
Uh,
bloc and an authoritarian bloc that increasingly works together, right? And the Russians, for example, they
mm,
have no moral qualms whatsoever in their power politics. They're more than willing to bomb Syria into dust, more than willing to inflict horrendous suffering on the Ukrainians. And even though this is a current topic that I am not necessarily, I'm not sure if I want to bring it up, but I do worry that we will, for example, do things like allow the Israelis to bomb Gaza into dust,
yeah,
just because
I have to tell
power
you
is
that.
power, you know.
Yeah, I have to tell you that that's something that I really think about when I see Kissinger, because the Israeli foreign strategy, right, is kind of based on this idea that we're never going to be anyone's bitches again. Kind of, we're not going to allow another Holocaust to happen again. We are done being the victims of other people. Our
Mhm.
state is here to protect us, and our state is here to prevent another atrocity. And in the name of preventing another atrocity, we are going to just affirm our dignity by any means possible. Like I think we both agree that Eichmann, the trial of Eichmann that happened, where he was nabbed of Argentina and just taken to Israel and taken to court, that was a good thing, right?
Yes,
That a Nazi was put on trial.
not a
But
controversial thing to say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think that's something that we need to like state out regardless, was that Eichmann was kidnapped, against international law.
Mhm.
The Israelis broke like the sovereignty of Argentina to exact its own like judicial code, for example, by going in, taking an Argentinian citizen and napping him into Israel, right? And you know, I guess it's very uncomfortable to say, about like what about the rights of a Nazi, but yeah, we have to contend with that, that we need to be able to say outright that some things are right and wrong if we want to believe in human rights. And we need to be able, vis-a-vis Israel, to be able to have these conversations, right? Like, um, what's too much? When do liberals go too far? Let's say. When
Basically,
are we
yeah,
going? Yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because Israel by day's end uh, is trying to create a democratic project, but it's trying to create a democratic project built on a lot of trauma, a lot of hurt, very real concerns that Jewish people have about the persecution that they faced everywhere else. But that can also be dangerous because yeah, we have a mutual friend GRM with whom I've had a lot of discussions about this. But if the state is built with like the idea that it's here to protect a specific group of people, if it's laid out, as the state of the Jewish people as opposed as a state for
Just
all
a
its
state.
citizens, for example. Yeah, just a state. Like, where do you make room for liberal universalism, right? Like, where do you make room to intellectually discuss just as a baseline, the human rights of
Hmm.
everybody else?
That's something
And
that
yeah, I
the
think.
the
Uh,
arch Polish realist Jerzy Giedroyc addressed that in his writings,
uh,
which was like he
yeah,
wrote this in the 1970s. He basically wrote an instruction manual on what Poland should do once
mm,
communism ends. And his
yeah,
most important line in this was basically the state is more important than the nation. He makes a differentiation between the nation and the
mm,
state. He said the nation is a sort of historical construct. It's an idea, right? Like the
yeah,
nation
yeah,
can be things like, the nation, if you speak of nationhood in general, that is something that is inspired by past incarnations of the entity. It's the nation also include things like um, the Polish-Lithuanian
people, culture.
Commonwealth. Yeah,
Uh,
like to and that was the big point of contention that Jerzy Giedroyc had, because the Polish government in exile demanded that once communism ends, Poland must demand the return of enormous pieces and parts of Lithuania,
yeah,
Belarus,
Galicia,
and
Riv.
Ukraine.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, enormous parts. But conveniently ignored, okay, what are we going to do with the parts of Germany that we got after the end of the Second World War?
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jerzy Giedroyc busted this bubble and said, no, we must, as nasty as it is, we Poles must accept the geographic outcome of the Ribbentrop-Stalin Pact and the Yalta Conference. We are a new state with new borders. We're not going to give up what we got from the Germans, but we are also not going to demand lands of Polish nationhood that are now in Ukraine or Belarus. We must accept the new reality. We must be realists about this. This was his new Polish realism. And his Polish
yeah,
realism
yeah,
was the existence of a Polish state is more important than the existence of the Polish nation, because the existence of the Polish nation opens the question of what is the Polish nation, and instead of obsessing over that
yeah,
question, we must create a state and secure this state, not what its borders
yeah,
are, not where it ends or where it begins. And it's that kind of conversation, that Jerzy Giedroyc conversation, is that the Israelis may want to
mm,
have at one point. What is more important to
yeah,
you? Is it the nation or is it the state?
yeah. Like, it's a very difficult task, because the
Yeah,
Poles also were victims of a genocide.
multiple.
It gets to this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very difficult to ask someone to let go of trauma, like in any situation, right? In any kind of
It's also
thing. But
unresolved. You have to keep in mind that
yeah,
this is
yeah,
still controversial in Poland. There are still Poles,
yeah.
not a majority, who demand give back Lviv,
Lithuania and
give
shit.
back
Yeah,
Lithuania. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But by the end of the day, I think if you want to be like a forward-looking society, eventually you gotta let go of the ghosts.
you know what
Otherwise,
the
you'll get
irony of that
stuck.
is,
Uh-huh.
of the Polish claim to Lithuania,
Yeah.
to Vilnius. Vilnius is the city that the Polish nationalists
Mm.
claim. Vilnius wasn't even majority Polish.
Oh shit! Oh, was it like the German Baltic
No,
Germans
no,
who
no,
live there?
no. Vilnius was almost 60% Jewish.
Oh shit!
It was the most Jewish city in the world. Yeah,
Oh wow!
60% of the population of Vilnius was Jewish. Its language wasn't Polish or Lithuanian. Its language was Yiddish. And
Yiddish? Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
and 40% of the population were Polish. There were almost no
Oh
Lithuanians who lived
shit!
in Vilnius, but 60% of the population was Jewish, 40% was Polish. And the reason
Hmm.
why this is was because Vilnius was home, established in the Middle Ages, the most important, I don't know how to call it, rabbinical, Talmudic school, a school where you studied the Talmud.
Rabbinical school, yeah.
Yes, yes, it was home to the most important and oldest rabbinical school in Europe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Talmud is the law.
yeah.
Rabbi is like the teacher.
It
Yeah.
was for centuries the sort of cultural capital of Judaism, was Vilnius.
Whoa.
And yeah,
I
and
imagine it's Are there still is there still a Jewish community in Vilnius, or were
Yes,
they
there's
like?
an
Oh,
irony there. When
okay.
the Poles
Uh-huh.
annexed, so the Poles annexed Vilnius, right, in the interwar
Uh-huh.
period. Then, as
Yeah.
part of the Stalin-Ribbentrop Pact, um, the Soviet Union got Lithuania.
Molotov-Ribbentrop.
Molotov, sorry, Molotov,
Yeah,
Ribbentrop.
yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
yeah, naughty. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the Soviet Union got Lithuania. When the Soviet Union annexed Lithuania, it collectivized the farms, and the state took over all the schools. And as part of that policy, the Soviet Union demanded that the Jews of Lithuania nationalize, hand over to the state and the Communist Party their Jewish schools, close down the Jewish
Mm.
academies, and hand over the Jewish
Yeah.
Städteles, the farms, the Jewish farming villages.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
half the Jews of Lithuania refused. And that
Mm.
half was deported to Siberia.
Ugh.
Then the Nazis took over Lithuania, and the Lithuanians blamed the Jews for the Polish takeover of Vilnius and the Soviet takeover of Lithuania. So the Lithuanians, a lot of Lithuanians, I should say, not all of them, but a lot,
Uh-huh.
collaborated with the Nazis in the extermination of the remaining Lithuanian Jews. And the rest of the
Wow.
Lithuanian Jews that were not deported to Siberia were by and large almost completely annihilated, murdered. And after the war, this is where the irony comes in, Lithuania still remained one of the Eastern European countries with one of the largest Jewish population, because half the Jews were deported to Siberia, as you remember. The
Mm.
majority of them survived the gulags. And after the death of Stalin, a lot of these Jews came back. So you still have a
Mm.
huge Jewish population in Lithuania. Huge is maybe a bit of an over exaggeration, but you have a substantial Jewish community in Lithuania. One of its previous
Mm-hmm.
presidents was Jewish. Quite a lot of Jews in Lithuania. But you have this weird,
Okay.
arrangement
Mm-hmm.
where, like, yeah, there's this conflict in history where so many Lithuanians collaborated with the Nazis in killing the Jews, then the Jews came back, right? So, yeah.
Mm.
I talked to a Lithuanian Jew a while ago. There's like this intense desire to revive Lithuania,
Yeah.
Vilnius in particular, becoming sort of the cultural capital of European Judaism.
Yeah. I think it would be a good precedent if there could be, you know, places for Jews outside of Israel.
Ah,
Like if we
we're
could like get rid
getting
of
into this
anti-Semitism.
conversation. We're getting into this conversation. I don't think we should discuss Zionism. I don't think
You're calling me.
yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, I was not even going into Zionism. I was going to say that, yeah,
There are
that is
very
very,
few Lithuanian Jews in Israel.
yeah, yeah,
Most of them decided to stay in Lithuania and still
uh-huh,
live in Lithuania because there isn't that much
yeah,
anti-Semitism in the post-communist
yeah,
Lithuanian state.
and that's
One thing I need
why
to
I
point out
wanted to
there
say,
is
uh-huh,
this is something important. Like, a lot of communists, I think people who you would call tankies, claim that
I
Stalin
don't miss that.
saved the Jews of Lithuania. And
No,
when they claim
no,
that, that is a very nasty lie. You should know that the reality of this is
yeah,
that Stalin deported half of Lithuania's Jews because they refused to
you
hand
know,
over their farms. That's not saving.
yeah,
You should know that.
yeah, that's something that I wish more people knew. Stalin was like incredibly anti-Semitic.
Mm.
That he led his
Mm.
project. Not only him personally, but his project. He led a very anti-Semitic project when he was in power. Stalin, at like a personal level, he would like imitate the Jews when talking to people. And one thing that he did was that he put his hands behind his ears, and he would like push them forward and to like imitate a Jew. I'm not sure if like the ears are like a stereotype, but that's something that he did, you know. And also, um, as part of the projects of decolonization, when those projects were around, a keystone of those was destroying the Jewish identity as a whole. You might learn more about this if you read books like On the Jewish Question by Marx. But there's this idea that in order to create the proletarian, you need to separate man from his religion, because the moment that you have a religion, you have a universal moral framework that is distinct from both the liberal and the socialist framework, and there can be a conflict where you have to choose between the loss of the state and the loss of your God. You know, it's the kind of thing that
Yeah.
Americans sometimes struggle with when they say, "I don't want to bake a cake for like a gay person," and
This is
that kind
this
of
is one
thing.
of the problem
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Stalin is an anti-Semite claim, because you have to keep in mind that one
yeah,
of Stalin's most loyal followers and friends, someone who was in every Stalin government to the end, was
hmm,
Lazar Kaganovich.
yeah. Kurganovich, he was a Jew,
Kaganovich was
and
a Ukrainian Jew, and
yeah,
Kaganovich still remained in Stalin's good graces to the end because Kaganovich completely renounced Jewishness in its entirety. So Stalin's
yeah,
anti-Semitism was the sort of anti-Semitism of the Jew is bad as long as he doesn't, as long as the Jew does not
yeah,
renounce their Jewishness.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the
Like
communist
when,
anti-Semitism. It's a very distinctive
yeah,
brand of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like this idea that uh, for man to be liberated, man has to become separate from his religion. You have to break the shackles of religion. And the thing with Jewish communities was that for communists that was incredibly difficult to do because Jewish people are very identified with their religion in a way that Christians aren't. Christians in Europe have had the privilege of being like majorities, and the state was designed with them in mind and that kind of thing. But Jewish people had to come together to build their own communities, to build their own capital, to build their own, structures of support, because the states were hostile against them. And then when you're trying to build communism and you say, okay, we're going to get rid of religion now, yeah, you approach the Jewish community, and they don't want to
Yeah.
get out of religion because they know that no matter how irreligious the Russian peasant that's now a citizen of the Communist Republic might claim to be, he might still be an anti-Semite, right? Like, and he still might be able to criticize you and be mean to you and act on his prejudices, right? And
Yes.
then you had the communist state endorsing a brand of anti-Semitism when they said, "Oh, we need to rid the Jew of his Jewishness," right? That's a sentence in the Jewish Question by Marx. The emancipation of mankind is the emancipation of the Jew, of mankind from Judaism, of mankind from Christianity, of mankind from Islam, and that kind of thing. And yeah, when you're trying to look at a person and trying to look at their religion as something that, okay, this is kind of like a disease that I'm going to try to cure you of, and I'm making that decision for you. Like, yeah, that's a bit of like the aggressive French secularism that I think we can fall into that kind of excess uh,
We
of
reached an
deciding for
hour,
other
by the way.
people.
We
Oh
agreed
yeah.
that we
Oh,
only
okay.
record our things for an hour, so we have to call again this week
Okay.
and
Yeah.
record more of our conversations because
Yeah.
people
We
have
have
waited a
another one
week now.
planned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you
Maybe
want
we call
to
again
like lay
tomorrow.
down? Yeah. Do you want to lay down conclusions like last time we recommended books and I think that was like very valuable.
I think you should read Kissinger's books. Gotta be honest
Yeah.
about that.
Learn what he
Because,
wants.
yeah, there's nothing more revealing than reading him, especially his dissertation from Harvard. The absolute bleak outlook you get from it of the world. It's just might makes right. It's so. It's like a fascistic text, really. But then again, that's my
Mm.
judgmentalness coming into it. It's there are
You
no
know, like it
values,
depends.
there are no
Yeah.
norms, there are no ideals. It's just might and power, and we must do everything to secure our power. It's just, ugh. It's so bleak. It's so dastardly. It's so contemptible. It's,
Yeah. It's
and
like a
that
bad
fucking
world to
was the
live in.
principle. That was a guiding principle of U.S. foreign policy for decades,
Uh,
and that's gross.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fuck him. Glad he's dead. Burn in hell
Yeah.
if it's real.
Okay. Yeah. 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 I guess what I would say is that realism. Indeed, in the case of the United States, you have the offensive realists like Mearsheimer. Uh, but here's the thing: people in the United States that have state power, they don't read Mearsheimer. He's like a niche person discussed in intellectual communities and maybe online. But when it comes to state building, he's not really that relevant. Not someone that people try to listen to. By his own admission, there's no one in the American government right now that would take his prescriptions to heart. If you want to look at realists that are like more relevant, look at the Copenhagen School. I will not recommend books because they're mostly papers and they're very abstract. But if you can go to Wikipedia and like research their ideas about realists that try to solve a conflict through peace, through agreement, through like settlement, and this idea that the European Union as a model might be like a viable way to resolve questions of security, I think that would be like a very good thing to end on, because it's a solution, right? It's policy. It's something that we can think about and ask our politicians to get for ourselves. If you care about realism, of course, there are like liberal approaches that might not like everything about the Copenhagen school. There are feminists that criticize the Copenhagen school because it's mostly a bunch of dudes in their 60s arguing about states at war. So yeah, just something interesting if you want to
A
think about.
guiding principle in politics for
Yeah.
me is self-restraint.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
It's being aware that you have power and restraining the power, creating mechanisms that restrain power.
yeah.
That is important
Very
to me.
German.
Yeah. The restraint of power. Yeah,
Okay.
it's very German, I know. The restraint of power is a guiding principle for my politics. That
Hmm.
you may have the power to do something, but you don't do it.
You have to decide if it's a good thing to do.
Exactly. I can address some of those of you who keep sending me videos by people attacking me and ask me to respond to them. Some of these people only have like 20,000 subscribers, 10,000 subscribers. You have any idea? Like, I'm closing in on 600,000 subscribers. Do you have any idea what damage I could do to these people if I just attacked them?
Mm.
Restraint is important. When you have power, you need to be aware of the excesses of power, what power can do to people. Like, I have a completely
Yeah.
different interpretation. Liberals have a complete, like myself, have a completely different interpretation of what power means than like postmodern thinkers that are so popular right now. We think about the restraints, not the dynamics.
Mm.
The restraints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not only about the construction even as well, because power can be a thing that you use for good, but ultimately, the good thing about liberalism is that it always comes back to the merits, right? Like,
Mm.
should we do this? Should we not do this? Can we, use reason, use like rational methods to create something that could approach to a scientifically good decision? If you were like a French revolutionary, like, can you argue and be sure that the things you are going to do with your power are things that are good, that make sense, and that will actually help you create the things that you want to create? I think that's very important here. And
On that
yeah,
note,
I think on that note we can end
okay.
the recording.
Bye bye, everyone. See you
All
later.
right, bye bye.